Hey there, welcome to Ballot Box with Tim Miller and Bill Kristol of the Bulwark. We are taping this episode. It's going to be live on Tuesdays here on YouTube, but it is a holiday week. I'm going to an undisclosed beach location, and Bill, it is undisclosed because of this. I don't know if you saw this. I'm surprising you with this. There was a little X post that people have been texting me all day. This guy, Mike Davis, who Maggie Haberman and Steve Bannon both say is a leading candidate to be in the Department of Justice in Trump 2.0, he writes, Mehdi Hassan is now on my indictment, detain, denaturalize, and deport lists. I already have a spot picked out in the D.C. Gulag. It's going to be in the women's cell block right next to Tim Miller. So, they're already planning their gulag spots. I hate to give guys like this attention, and like this tough guy shtick is obviously absurd, and I'm not actually scared for myself. But where is your alarm scale? When we got to guys that well-sourced reporters like Maggie Haberman say are on the inside, popping off things like that.
As you know, my alarm scale in general was a little bit off the charts, so I'm not the best. No, I mean, it's all ridiculous and ludicrous and contemptible, of course, but childish until it's really dangerous, right? And so, I mean, it is, I assume you're not going to be in a gulag, but no, I mean, even making those kinds of threats, it is, what everyone says, the Overton window, normalizing, it's all true, in my opinion. It's proven to be true. I mean, whenever I think about it, doesn't matter. The last 7 years have shown very clearly that stuff that is said that's totally crazy becomes a little bit extreme, then maybe not even so extreme, and then let's have a serious debate about it,
Exactly. And as I was saying today, I'm not actually concerned for myself, but the Overton window is a good way to talk about this, right? So if you're moving it to such a place where it's like, we're going to put Never Trumpers in the gulag or MSNBC hosts or whatever, like that's probably not going to happen, right? But it warms the ground for some of this other stuff, right? It seems less crazy, right? And I think I'd be very concerned if I was, a green card holder or someone that came to the country and was undocumented. I think that a lot of the similar discussion of small sprawling camps, et cetera, seems very realistic for them. I'm very concerned about some of the other stuff that Davis and these guys talk about freeing the January 6th prisoners and what kind of permission structure that creates for people if they feel like they can, if Trump wins again, they can act with impunity and they know that they would get pardoned. So to me, that's like where the real threat lies on this kind of stuff.
And going after people in law enforcement who don't agree with them, who are obstacles to their not just freeing the J6 prisoners, but maybe indicting people who are causing real trouble for the people who, some of whom testified against the J6 prisoners. I mean, a lot of this stuff that we tend to associate with not countries that are not like the U.S. It's not so far-fetched anymore, unfortunately.
All right. Well, Ballot Box is supposed to be the Ballot Box, but I felt like, when people were talking about putting me in the window.
This is the stakes of what's on the ballot.
Exactly. I guess
that
gulags.
We can everything in if we do that.
Gulags are now part of the ballot box. Okay, so we're going to talk. I want to talk about the GOP primary. I want to give a bull. I want to close with a little bit of the bull view for Biden, given his terrible poll numbers. It gives people something to look forward to. But I want to talk a little bit about this Arizona Senate race because there's kind of an interesting development here. It's sort of the inverse of what the concern is about the presidential race, right? Where there'd be this third party candidate that would pull more from the Joe Biden side of the ticket is the fear with no labels. What we're seeing in the Arizona Senate race is you have Carrie Lake, my friend Carrie Lake, who is looking like she's going to be unopposed to be the Republican nominee, which is insane as it is. Ruben Gallego, who's pretty progressive, but a mainstream progressive, but definitely I wouldn't call him center left, really. Democrat who looks like he's going to be the nominee. And then you have Kristen Sinema, the incumbent senator, who's going to run as an independent, or at least she says she is. Early polling is showing that she's actually hurting Lake, because it's a lot of the Ducey type voters, more center-right Republican voters who may come around to Lake at the very end, if they're forced to in a binary, but looking for a safe place to go. And so Republicans, the NRSC right now has already begun an ad campaign trying to boost Cinema's liberal bona fides to try to, get her back in the good graces of some Democrats and see if they can't like even that out, where she's taking as much from Gallego as she is from Lake. So open question. What do you think about that tactic and just the Arizona Senate race in general?
I guess it's a reasonable tactic. Matters if you can move. If she's really going to run, I'm sort of dubious at the end of the day that she runs as an independent there.
Me too.
It does feel like she's going to be third, and is that really the way she'd want to go out? I've always assumed wants to be VP on the no labels presidential ticket. And, she's young, sort of oddball, but centrist Democrat, I guess you'd say, more of an eccentric Democrat.
Eccentric Democrat. That's better. I agree with that.
Yeah, but I mean, so anyway, I'm a little dubious about maybe spending a lot of money, but they're probably not spending that much money now, defining her and all that. I do think the third party thing is somewhat indeterminate in general. I mean, I'm anti-no labels. I do think it probably hurts, almost very likely hurts Biden more. But, people shouldn't be too dogmatic about this. You don't know ahead of time. I mean, a lot does depend on who the candidate is. It also depends a little bit state by state. And so with Robert Kennedy Jr., who isn't being taken seriously enough. I don't know if you agree with that. Someone made that point the last week. I thought it was a good point. I think that's very hard to know, and I think it could change. He could right now be taking Trump anti-vaxxers, but 9 months from now it could look pretty different, I think. Don't you think?
Yeah, I do. It was my friend Peter Hamby wrote this for Puck, and it was interesting. He was it was a smart piece. We'll put it up here if folks want to check it out. And his point was, if you look at the numbers in states with a lot of particularly states that over-index on black voters, that Kennedy was actually was taking some of the anti-vax crank vote from Trump, but was also taking a lot of mainstream black Democratic vote from Biden. And who knows? In a year from now, would that still be the case? But maybe that's just that expressing frustration with Biden over inflation or over other age concerns, and Kennedy is just kind of a normal, people aren't paying attention that closely, maybe don't realize the extent of Kennedy's crankitude. But again, I think this stuff is a little less predictable than maybe, some of us like to say. And it's important to consider the unintended consequences. If
you want to think of it as a social sciencey way, I mean, the hardcore voters for the third party or independent candidate could be different from the soft voters, right? So you start off with your 28%, but I'm making this up, obviously, but the top 20% could be different in character from the bottom solid 8%. And I do have the feeling that might be the case with some of these, with someone like Kennedy, that the actual vote he would have at the end, which probably shrinks a lot from his original number, might be more likely to be Biden-esque voters than Trump voters, and the Trump voters who go home. But I do think, I mean, Sinema, I'm a little surprised by this in the sense that she has voted with the Democrats to organize the Senate in a very, very close Senate, 50-50, 51-49. So that's going to become more in a federal election where the presidential choice at the top of the ticket, federal presidential year election.
Sure.
The whole question with the Senate evenly divided, that's going to become a very big deal. And I don't know what Sinema will say as an independent right now, sitting independent. She's still caucusing with the Democrats and helping them have their majority.
Right.
And so I do think Carrie Lake at the end of that election just says, look, she sounds conservative, but she's been with Chuck Schumer for the last 6 years. And I think Carrie Lake's voters come home in that way, that I'm not so sure about Gallego. So I don't know. I'm not so sure of which one she
love contrarian Bill Kristol on both of these scores here. All of the experts are saying that Sinema hurts Lake and the no labels hurts Biden, and you're maybe flipping that. I like that. We'll keep monitoring this. Just one other thing on the Arizona Senate race. I mean, we all have seen my exchange with Carrie Lake, which was weird, I guess, would be one way to put it, but interesting that she's trying to she's trying to tack back towards normalcy while at the same time not really being able to control herself, and still just kind of being this MAGA bomb thrower at heart. And there's only so much you can do to soften those edges, but you can do a little bit. What is your it is kind of crazy, right, that she's running this race essentially unopposed. I guess there is some token opposition, but that the NRSC is basically on board with this, that being the National Republican Senate Committee, which is run by kind of mainstream Steve Daines, to the extent that there are mainstream Republicans left, right? It's not like, it's not like some far like Trump super PAC or something, but she has basically coalesced the whole party. That's pretty telling, isn't it?
Yeah, well, it doesn't make the point that you've made so many times that it's a MAGA party, and that people who look, it's the over the window again, if you want to think of it this way. She starts off as extreme. She wins a pretty tough contested race for in the primary for
Very
Arizona
tough.
governor.
Yeah.
That all the Republicans fall in line. Didn't Ducey support like
Ducey ends
right?
up falling in line.
And she gets within 17,000 votes, 0.4%, I think, of winning. And then, of course, if you get that close, you know this, in a statewide race, you're a pretty logical nominee for the next statewide race, whether senator or governor,
That's
right?
true.
I mean, that's kind of how politics often works. You get very close the first time, food or something in South Dakota, then you win the second one. So I think they may have just thought it was hopeless to oppose Lake, and the polling suggests that she's dominant in the primary. And again, are there any Lake voters in 2024 for Senate who will desert? Are there any Lake voters in 2022 who will desert her in 2024 when it's a Senate race instead of a governor's race? I'm not so sure there are. So she starts off with like 49%, I wouldn't bet a lot against her.
That's true. I know a bigger turnout in so it's a little bit of a different electorate, but yeah, I do agree with that. One last funny anecdote on this, from a friend in Arizona, as part of Lake's charm offensive, this has been reported that she's meeting with all the McCain people and meeting with all the Ducey people and trying to, get everybody back to their good graces. She met with that opponent you mentioned, Karen Taylor Robeson, who was expecting an apology during the private meeting and got the same carry I got, basically. So I do think that her charm offensive might have some limits, to the persona. But we'll see how that shakes out. I think this is going to be an interesting race to monitor. Okay. Presidential primary race. A lot of the stuff we've talked about ad nauseum, but there's one interesting poll that I think is worth dissecting here. University of North Florida, I guess. It's a local poll out of Florida where Ron DeSantis is governor, you may know. Donald Trump, 60. Ron DeSantis, 21. Nikki Haley, the great hope of the normies, 6. 60, 21, 6. Just one poll, all the caveats. But Bill, try to give us a contrarian view on that one.
I mean, I'll try. I mean, there is a scenario, I think you and I argued last week, whether it's 6% or 10% or something like that, of a Nikki Haley surge within 10, 12 points in Iowa, maybe beating out DeSantis. DeSantis and Christie collapse. Maybe Nikki actually runs even or beats Trump in New Hampshire. Those two things seem to me non-crazy, not likely, but somewhat possible. The trouble with that scenario is then it assumes, as Haley herself has said, we go to South Carolina and I beat him. Well, Trump is so strong in those Southern Republican electorates. I mean, South Carolina and Florida are probably actually not that different electorates. I mean, they are somewhat different, but and the fact that Trump is winning, of course, it's horrible for DeSantis. That's what people focused on in their commentary on that. But it does show why it's going to be hard to beat Trump, because he may have even if he gets nicked in Iowa or New Hampshire or others, a couple other northern states, he has a pretty big firewall down south, it would seem.
He does. Just a little PTSD for me back to 2016. So Jeb had dropped out by the time we got to the Florida primary. I had moved on to working for a super PAC that was aiming to stop Trump. And we were kind of a neutral super PAC, essentially, where we were helping Marco essentially in Florida and helping Ted Cruz in Texas and other states where he could win better. And this was really when I knew things were dead. Trump ends up winning Florida in 2016, 46-27, Marco with 27 in second, Ted Cruz 17 in third. So, he's doing a little bit better than that, but that I just think speaks to like the reality. Now, I think that there was some reason to think that maybe DeSantis might be able to break that, right? And maybe Trump had 46. You can imagine a scenario where DeSantis would have taken a little bit from him. Maybe Trump goes down to 40 and DeSantis could win a 60-40, right? This was the bull case for DeSantis when he started his campaign. But at this point, like he's just done, right? I mean, how do you recover back that the degree that he is behind Trump and his?
No, DeSantis is a governor. Marco was only senator, and DeSantis was reelected, and Marco was at that point was a one-term senator. So DeSantis should be much stronger against Trump than Rubio was, and he's weaker. So that is stunning. It does make you wonder, though, if Haley can just beat DeSantis in Iowa. DeSantis, I mean, whether he gets out or not, I think he's just done. His vote goes into low single digits, really.
I think he has to. If he loses Iowa, he has to get out to save face. I mean, it goes back to Kerry Lake that you never know what happens next time.
Christie collapses into low single digits if he's not much above them anyway. because, people just don't want to waste their vote. So it gets actually weirdly closer to a two-person race than people have thought. I mean, for all the talk, remember 2-3 months ago, it was all, well, no one will get out for Iowa. I mean, Scott's going to stay into Iowa because of the evangelicals heads. It turns out people get out. Partly it's money, partly it's pride. If you have an ongoing career like Scott, you don't want to look ridiculous. Biden got out before any vote was cast in 2008, and he became the vice president. Or maybe did he stay in Iowa? I can't remember, get 1% maybe, but I mean, he was out fast.
Yeah.
So it's not the worst career move to make necessarily.
Man,
anyway,
this is making me feel old. We're going to have to fact check this. I think Biden stayed in for Iowa.
Vice President Harris got out before any vote was cast, and it turned out to be the right thing for her to do when she becomes vice president of the United States for Biden, right? So I wonder, it's not going to happen with Trump, obviously, with DeSantis, but I wonder if we could be down to 2 people by New Hampshire, and I don't know, at that point, maybe there's some vote for Nikki that makes it somewhat close.
Okay, let's see. Joe Biden did end up getting 1% in Iowa, in the Iowa caucus, so in 2008. So there you go. You could survive that, and then be president 100 years later. Okay, moving on to Joe Biden. Who's had a long and winding path here to the presidency. You've been, I think, rightly waving the flag. There should be, concerns about Biden's age. You just look at these numbers, and the numbers keep saying the same thing. I think we've discussed this a lot. We'll continue to discuss it a lot. What I want to focus on right now is the Bull case that I've seen a couple places, but this guy, who is a former Democratic pollster, put out just kind of a little bullet form, which I do think is the best case for Biden. So I'm going to share that here and get your reaction. Trump's narrow polling lead now over Biden is more a reflection of voters venting frustration with Biden in this moment than actually viewing this race as a 2-person choice. Trump's been largely out of the news. That's worked to his benefit. We've talked that a lot. Despite political journalist obsession with crosstabs, he writes that he does not believe we're heading for the largest age and race voting realignment in decades. This is referencing the fact that in a lot of recent polls, you've seen Biden's numbers go down dramatically, particularly with young voters and voters of color. His explanation for it, this pollster, is that Biden has a turnout issue right now among young voters and black voters. His polling is showing them flocking to Trump is largely attributable to what he calls partisan non-response. This is a technical term pollsters use to say if you're a partisan and you're not excited about your candidate, you're less excited to respond to pollsters, right? So if you're more excited about your candidate, you're more excited to let your day be disrupted to tell people that you're going to vote for someone. The final point is that Biden does have an age problem, but his campaign has a year and a bunch of money to try to even the score on that front and remind people that Trump is also an old. So how compelled are you by that case, the Bull case for Biden?
I think that's an intelligent case. I think the choice not referendum is the key case, and that's always been the key argument for intelligent people for why Biden's paying a big price for now for being the incumbent in a country where 80% think we're on the wrong track and everyone disapproves of everything. And so if you're the incumbent, you're unlikely to do very well. When it comes down to a real choice about who you are for the next 4 years, Biden still pay some price for being an incumbent in a country where people disapprove of the incumbents. And I still would therefore slightly prefer a non-incumbent Democratic candidate against Trump. But but I take the point. That's a very fair point. There'll be some presumably real focus on Trump and Trump going forward. I'm a little spooked by the fact that retrospectively people are weirdly friendly to the Trump's presidency. I mean, so it's not a normal challenger incumbent. It's like ex-incumbent versus current incumbent. And I would be happier if people said, well, Trump also did an awful job. And weirdly in the polls, I mean, not weirdly, it's just a fact. It is weird too. Trump does better in the judgments of his presidency than the judgments of Biden's presidency. Maybe that'll get corrected, but that's a little bit scarier than the normal, it'll correct when it becomes a choice, not a referendum. The other thing is someone pointed this out to me, there was this wacky Argentinian election where, again, the incumbent party lost. I believe in every election since 2020 in at least major countries, I think maybe with the exception of France, which has some weirdness, the challenger has won. That is, people say, the authoritarians are doing well, the Democrats are doing well. But it turns out that's actually just like the authoritarians lose if they're the incumbent, Brazil, Poland, and the Democrats lose if Democrats or whatever
Right.
quasi-Democrats lose. In the case of Argentina, if they're the incumbent, but that's true in Slovakia and other countries. So there is a lot of anti-incumbency floating around the world.
Yeah, Orban and France, I think, are the two that come to mind, right?
Yeah,
for me, right, during this time, right? So those are the two, and those are on the opposite sides of the spectrum. But the France model is one I always keep mentioning, right? Because that's like literally the Biden model. Macron was extremely unpopular, and eventually, yeah, he made it about Le Pen being a lunatic, right? And so that would be the other data point to the bull case, but it is very alarming. You look at I think the White House put out, or maybe a friend of the White House sent it to, I forget, but someone in Biden world had highlighted that Biden's favorability numbers are actually the highest of all of the Western leaders, right? Which in one sense, could be spun as a positive, but in the other sense is like, to your point, it's like, well, this should be very alarming that, throughout the entire world, people are saying we don't like the state of affairs and maybe we want to throw the bums out. And I don't know. I don't. You have more historical perspective than me on this front.
I'm overly affected, obviously, by '92 and being there in the George H.W. Bush White House, watching everyone just decide to chuck us out, regardless of the fact that he was a pretty good president. So, who knows?
The Biden HW similarities are definitely pretty concerning. Okay, I wanted to end it on positive. My take is I basically agree with this guy says too. I think that the threat of Trump is what makes people rightly concerned and worried and trying to navigate what's the best way out of it, right? Like if it was Nikki Haley on the other side, I would be pretty compelled by this point. I do think that if you just look at the Biden numbers, he is the weakest with groups that are in the Democratic coalition. And so you would have to believe that people that are in the Democratic coalition a year from now would look at Biden and Trump and say, I don't know, that Trump guy, he is kind of weird, but I'm going to give him a shot because I'm annoyed that my Outback Steakhouse dinner was $20 more this week than it used to be. I guess that could happen. But that is somewhat reassuring to everybody for Thanksgiving. Bill, do you have anything? We'll close. Anything you're thankful for that you want to share? A favorite Thanksgiving dish, a Thanksgiving memory, any Thanksgiving themed things you would like to share?
I once tweeted that I liked, to oversimplify this complex treat, I like fruit pies and I dislike pecan pie and pumpkin pie. And I just want to
Did that hurt?
Nothing has happened
upset about that?
I tweeted that has changed my mind. Fruit pies are so much superior. And it's unbelievable how many people like pumpkin pie or pecan pie.
I'm a pumpkin pie man. So we're aligned on so much. And so I'm happy to have this battle. And I'll be sending you a selfie of myself at the undisclosed beach with a pumpkin pie. We'll be back live next Tuesday, Ballot Box with Bill and Tim. Everybody have a great Thanksgiving. We'll talk to y'all soon.